So we've been talking about how to solve different types of quadratic equations. I suggest you pay attention. How can you tell if an equation is a quadratic equation? It's got an x squared term. It's got an x squared. Well, hang on. What are the different types of solving that we've learned so far? No. No, I'm not asking for the types of factoring. I'm asking for the types of solving that we've done so far. We've done two. What was the very first type that we solved? What did we do to find our answers? Can't hear you. Positive, negative what? Why don't you look at lesson 3.1? Look at lesson 3.1. What was the first method we learned? Yes, where you take the positive and negative square roots.
And then factoring, and then quadratic formula.
Good. We haven't done the quadratic formula yet. So, with a question like this, what's the difference between these two quadratic equations? Yeah, the second one has an x term. If there's no x term, like the first one, there's no x or no 7x or no minus 4x or no x, that's when we use the positive and negative square root. Get the square root by itself, or get the x squared by itself. Take the positive and negative square root of the number to solve. That's the positive and negative square root method. If it has an x term, like the second example, this is where we factor. So this one, why are you so late?
I'm sick in the library getting your stuff.
I don't think it takes that long. So this would factor to x plus 3 times x minus 2. And then what do? We set each factor equal to 0 to find our solutions. So x plus 3 is equal to 0, which means x is negative 3. X minus 2 is equal to 0 in the second factor, which means our second answer is x equals 2. What happens if we can't factor? We need another method. Okay? And it's kind of based on completing the square. We can develop a formula that actually works with any type of quadratic equation, but we use it for ones that we can't factor. And this is what it looks like, and you will always get this formula. If you're given a quadratic equation that looks like this, ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, you can find x by doing the negative of the b value plus or minus the square root of the b value squared minus 4 times the a times the c value divided by 2 times the a value. Yes, that looks like a big formula, but you guys will get used to using it pretty quickly. Okay? You will always get this formula. This is for when we can't factor. And we can't do the plus minus square root. Okay? So here are some examples where all we're going to do is we're going to use the formula, simplify as much as we can. So I'm just going to rewrite this formula so we have it as a reference. X equals negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. In this equation, this example, is everything over to one side and 0 on the other? Yes. What's the value of a? Nope. 1. What's the value of b? Negative 6. What's the value of c? 7. So we just plug those in. Be careful, because it's going to be negative 6. It will when we simplify it. Plus or minus. Remember, when you square a negative, you need parentheses, because when you square a negative, it becomes positive. Minus 4 times the value of a, which is 1, times the value of c, which is 7. All divided by 2 times the value of a, well, we know a is 1. So now we just simplify this as much as we can. First thing you guys said was, correct, negative 6 becomes positive 6. I can do a lot of simplifying inside the square root. What's negative 6 all squared? 36 minus 4 times 1 times 7. 28. All divided by 2 times 1. 2. I can keep going. 36 minus 28 gives me what? Yeah. 8. Okay. That looks a lot easier to work with. Can I keep going? What can I do? Not quite. This becomes square root 4 times square root 2, which is 2 root 2. You forgot to square root the 4. Yes. Good. Plus or minus 2 root 2. Look at all the non-square root numbers. Can I reduce them all? Yeah, I could divide them all by 2. This gives me 3. This gives me 1. This gives me 1. So my answer is 3 plus or minus 1 root 2, or just root 2, divided by 1 I don't have to write. Remember, there's 2 answers here. The 2 answers are 3 plus the square root of 2 and 3 minus the square root of 2. When we use the quadratic formula, we're using 2 answers. That plus minus tells us. Okay? So you just got to know your simplifying skills, plug it in the formula, know how to simplify, and you should be okay. All right, let's look at the next one. It's in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So what's a? 3. B? B is 1. And c? Okay, let's plug it all in. So I'm not going to rewrite the formula. I'm just going to go straight into it. So negative b, or negative 1, plus or minus square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 2 divided by 2 times 3. And then I simplify as much as I can. One squared. What's negative 4 times 3 times negative 2? Sorry? Plus 24. Watch out for that. Well, I can keep going under the square root. 1 plus or minus square root 25 over 6. Sorry, negative 1. Can I keep going? What's the square root of 25? It's 5 exactly. So I get negative 1 plus or minus 5 over 6. So that means I can keep going. Remember, I've got two answers here. Negative 1 plus 5 divides 6, and negative 1 minus 5 divides 6. What's negative 1 plus 5? Four over 6, which simplifies to 2 over 3. That's an answer. So notice these answers don't have square roots in them this time. What's negative 1 minus 5? Divide 6? That's the other answer. What that actually means is I could have solved this by factoring.
I have a question.
Yes.
Where it's like this, you split, you see how there we solved it, and then we figured out the answers?
Yeah, you don't need to write this down here. You can leave it here.
Okay.
But if you can take this square root exactly, you have to go all the way to the separate answers. What do I have to do here?
You're gonna have to move the next or
Yeah. So x squared minus 5x plus 7 equals 0. What's A?
negative 1,
1. What's B?
negative 5,
C?
7.
Okay. So quadratic formula. Negative negative 5. It will work out to 5. Plus negative 5, don't forget the parentheses, squared, minus 4 times 1 times 7 over 2 times 1. Well, negative negative 5 becomes positive 5 plus or minus, what's the square root of negative 5 all squared? Minus, what's 4 times 1 times 7?
28.
28, all over 2. I can keep simplifying under the square root. And I get 5 plus or minus negative 3 over 2. Now what? I don't know. You tell me. Does something look weird? Yeah? What's the square root of negative 3? Let's write on your calculator. Square root of negative 3. Try it on your calculator. Seriously. Yeah, it doesn't work. Why can't you take the square root of a negative? Like, what's the square root of negative 25? You can't square root a negative. So that means there's no possible answer because these don't know. That's an answer. There's no answer, or we say no solution. If it's a negative there, there is no answer because you can't do it.
Wow.
Sure, why not? How about this one?
A is 4.
Nope, I wouldn't start that yet. Sorry? Yeah, you got to move the 7x over. 4x squared minus 7x in the middle minus 1.
A is 4.
So x equals negative negative 7 plus or minus the square root of
Negative 7 squared minus 4 times 4.
yes, automatic, you lose marks right here. You need parentheses around the negative 7 to square. Minus 4 times,
Times 4.
yeah,
Times no, negative 1.
times negative 1. All over 2 times 4. So negative negative 7 becomes 7. Plus or minus, what's negative 7 all squared? 49. What is minus 4 times minus 1? It's not negative 16. Positive 16 over 8. And I can keep going under the square root. 49 plus 16, 65. So there is going to be an answer because it's positive. Can I do anything with the 65? Can I take it exactly? No. Is there a highest perfect square? 8's not a perfect square. There is none. So that's as far as we can go.
Perfect. Yes.
Okay. All right, last one that I want to look at. What's upsetting you about this question?
The fraction.
Right. So how could I deal with it? We've learned how to get rid of fractions in equations. Okay, so what would I times everything by? Sorry? Ladies, focus. What's the denominator?
4.
So how do I get rid of a divide 4? And whatever you do to one thing in an equation,
Every other thing.
so everything gets times by 4. Everything. So 4 times 1 over 4, well, the 4's cancel out and I'm left with 1x squared. Minus 4 times 3x, 12x, plus 4 times 9, equals 4 times 0. Notice it's still a quadratic equation with everything on one side and 0 on the other. And no fraction. Now, This is where you're going to have to start recognizing which one to solve. Yes, we can do the quadratic formula. We can. But the quadratic formula is kind of a last resort. Factoring is much more efficient. Can you factor this?
Yeah. The numbers look nice.
They look like they could be factored. No, you know what? That's actually a good point, because like if you look here, like these ones, maybe, okay? But what happens if you get stuck factoring? What happens? Then you go to the quadratic formula. Why would you do it? Why would you do it for a simple one like x squared equals 16? Anyway, what does this factor to?
X, -6, and positive. No, -6.
Okay, so actually it's going to be the same answer for both, isn't it? Set each factor equal to 0 to find your solutions. So in this one, x is equal to 6, and in this one, x is also equal to 6. So there's only one answer, 6.
Yeah.
This is why factoring can be much more efficient. The chances of making mistakes if you just jump right into the quadratic formula. Yes, you could. What's that? Yes, we can do it that way. Just one second. Yes, that's fine. So what's going to happen? You know what? Because we can factor it, that means that the quadratic, or that means when we do the quadratic formula, there's going to be no square roots in the answers. The answer is going to work out to 6. So hang on. Negative b. So negative 12 plus or minus negative 12 in parentheses squared minus 4 times 1 times 36 divided by 2 times 1. Negative 12 becomes positive 12. And then under the square root, what's negative 12 all squared? I heard it, 144. Minus, what's 4 times 1 times 36? Yeah. Use a calculator if you need to. So it's minus 144 over 2. So that means we get 12 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2. Well, the square root of 0 is nothing, so that completely disappears, and I'm just left with 12 divided by 2, which is 6. Has to be the same. Okay? Yes, but that being said, there are some times when I will say, I want you to solve this by factoring.
Okay. Then you have to. If you do it this way.
Yeah, that's right. Then you have to. Thanks for stating the obvious. Thank you so much. Regat, your question. No, not necessarily. Here's what I would suggest. With the x squared ones, see if you can factor. With the ones that has a number in front of the x squared, those are the tougher ones to factor, right? So unless I tell you you must solve it by factoring, which means it can be factored, you could use the quadratic. What's that? No, I am not. I think, you know what? We've known each other since grade 9. I think you can say about me that I'm pretty fair. Absolutely. But Yeah, but like not ones with like, you guys need to be able to recognize ones like this. Like, how would you solve that one? Yeah, to factor or use the quadratic formula. Otherwise, we do what? The plus minus square root. Get x squared by itself, and then take the positive and negative square root of both sides and simplify it if you can. Can you simplify root 13 at all? No. So we're done. That's not an efficient one to use the quadratic formula. Okay? And I'm concerned that you guys are having difficulties recognizing this one. But there's no, like, you see, that's why I wrote them at the beginning. There's a difference between the two. One has an x squared term and a number. That's the one where we use the positive negative square root. If it's got three terms, x squared, x, and a number, that's when we use factoring of the quadratic formula. Like here, what would I use? We're not solving it. I don't even know if you can factor it. But what would I use? Factoring quadratic or plus minus square root? Why? Because there's an x term.
No.
Which one? Which method? The plus minus square root, because there's no x term. Okay, there's only two terms here. You've got to be able to recognize the difference. Okay, we're not going to do the word problem, but we are going to do the last example on Wednesday. But now you can do exercise 3.4. That's what your test is going up to. On Wednesday, we'll do the ones at the end of 3.4 together, because that's where it's just a whole mix, and you've got to choose which method to solve it, because that's going to be the majority of your test. Okay? I'm not repeating it. So come up and get an outline and a review exercise if you already hadn't, if you don't have one yet.